What is the president's relationship to his 35-year-old staffer? That is the question being asked around Washington today about Donald Trump and Natalie Harp. A Democratic senator and almost certain serious presidential candidate brought her up in a speech this weekend, which has set off a 5-alarm fire in the White House, just as we have learned that during his catering caper Air Force One switch out, Trump insisted that Harp, a very junior staffer, go with him. So we're going to talk about what exactly we know about what's going on here and what the White House freakout over this is telling us too. But first, Todd Blanche's big day out was this weekend. The newly minted Attorney General steps out with his new title right into the national headlines onto national TV and says some incredibly troubling things that are set to remake how the Attorney General and the Department of Justice behave. It's Tuesday, August 18th, 2026. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Grant Hermes. We are coming to the end of the Make It Make Sense anniversary celebration deal. If you haven't become a subscriber to Make It Make Sense yet, what are you doing? You only have a few more days left to get in on the launch price of $5 a month or $50 a year. That gets you access to things you forgot from civics class, the weekly original reporting that you're not going to find anywhere else, the entire archive of the podcast, the occasional Make It Make nonsense, and too long tuned out to keep all of that in one place. Plus, subscribers will get early access to anything new that I may or may not be working on right now, too. That deal only runs until August 20th, so you've got until then to get in. All right. Let's get on with the show. This weekend, Todd Blanche made his big debut as the official Attorney General. He was at a rally for the Republican candidate for governor in New York, which was likely against federal law, but is most certainly against the norm of the Department of Justice, which is to be apolitical when it comes to elections and campaigning. And then he went on NBC's Meet the Press, their Sunday politics show, and gave one of the wildest interviews I've ever seen a sitting Attorney General give. This is how it started.
Personal defense attorney, can you pledge that the Justice Department will always act independently of the White House?
Well, there's a big difference between saying we will always do our job and investigate any case and act independently of the White House. No, I'm not going to pledge that. And no attorney general should ever pledge that. The president, if I were to pledge I will be independent of the White House, what that means is that if President Trump says, I want the Department of Justice to go after every violent criminal in this country, which is what he has said, what you're saying to me is I should say, no, sir, not going to do it. So I will act with integrity. Our prosecutors will act with integrity. We will prosecute without fear or any sort of favor. And that's exactly what we've been doing, and that's what every Department of Justice should do.
Well, I guess big picture, if the president asks you to do something that you feel crosses an ethical or legal line, would you do it?
The president will never ask me to do something unethical or legal or illegal. He never has. He never will.
So to be clear, that is the Attorney General of the United States, the person in charge of what is meant to be the nation's most important, most independent department, saying he's not that into that idea. Leaving aside that it's a little weird that Todd Blanche thinks that independence and defiance are the same thing, or more that independence and agreement can't be the same thing, his claim that Trump has never asked him to do something unethical or illegal is a straight-up lie. In April, while Blanche was acting Attorney General, Trump's public statements about wanting revenge against former FBI Director James Comey led to his indictment. Trump posted those things on Truth Social where official presidential directives are made, because that's the world we live in now, I guess. In May, Trump's complaints to Blanche personally about reporting in the Wall Street Journal about the war in Iran prompted the unethical harassment of journalists and subpoenas of those journalists, and not to mention Blanche's involvement in brokering the $1.8 billion slush fund and Trump's IRS immunity deal, both of which were the reasons a federal judge referred Blanche for formal discipline after attempting to what was alleged to be defrauding the court. Now, on that point, it was pretty clear how Blanche was acting, because when he was asked about his relationship to Trump in a hearing in the Senate, he slipped and said this.
Are you and President Trump friends?
I'm his lawyer, was his lawyer, and now I'm the Deputy Attorney General. So,
as a reminder, Blanche was Trump's criminal defense attorney in his New York fraud case that Blanche lost. which is why the president's felony rap sheet is more like one of those scrolls that drops and rolls out on the floor. So the DOJ is not going to try to be independent, which is a huge problem, and it's the latest in what the White House has been trying to do in tearing down a 139-year history in the United States of having independent government agencies. The White House considers independent agencies a threat to its mission of centralizing power under Trump. In an executive order from February of last year, the official language from the administration is that these are, quote, so-called independent agencies that, quote, undermine accountability to the American people and prevent a unified and coherent execution of federal law. And the leaders of these agencies, quote, must be supervised and controlled by the people's elected president. So when Blanche does say later in this interview that he'll differ with Trump on occasion, or that Trump will encourage people to do that, which we know really isn't true, we also know that Blanche isn't just lying because he continues to think of himself as Trump's personal attorney, but it's also not the official policy of the White House that he'll even be allowed to differ with Trump. And if you want more on that, this week's Things You Forgot from Civics class is all about how our independent agencies work, or how they're supposed to work, and why that matters. All of that was just the first question, though, right? Blanche was asked about the reflecting pool case as well, and the fact that it had been dropped, but Trump wants it revived and then might fire Jeanine Pirro, the former Fox News host and state prosecutor that he made D.C. U.S. attorney. Blanche said he still supports Pirro, and so does Trump, which, again, doesn't seem true. But when he was asked about, proof of vandalism here, this is what he said.
There was potential vandalism, and we know that there was vandalism because there's witnesses. That's also in the brief that you're citing, that there's witnesses that talked about the fact that there was vandalism.
What do you mean by potential vandalism?
Well, there's a witness that said, I observed the defendant vandalizing the reflecting pool. Now, that's different than whether ultimately we had the proof, and you saw what U.S. Attorney Pirro said about that in her filings. And I said this before, we're talking about a single case, okay? We're talking about one case. We had another case of vandalism against a memorial earlier this week.
Yeah, proof is a pesky thing. And Blanche moves on really quickly there because there wasn't any. That was what was found in the case. And he moves on to a different vandalism case against the World War II memorial, which is not the reflecting pool, although the two are right next to each other. So we don't really get an answer there either. And Blanche, you can see, is pretty visibly nervous about trying not to upset his brand new apple cart. And then there's another huge moment in this interview. And again, all of this is happening in like a 12-minute span. Blanche is asked about the fact that the DOJ has lost what is now 23 cases, attempting to force states to hand over private voter data. He says this in response.
Playing the role that we're playing, and that's really what we're litigating.
How far are you willing to take this fight? Because you've been ruled against now 22 times. Are you going to take this all the way to the Supreme Court, do you anticipate?
We'll see. We'll see what happens. We're trying to work it out with states. Of course. Yes, absolutely. It's a possibility. Election integrity.
I don't like to be a guy who says I told you so, but I did. And I have been for weeks. The road to what the Trump administration wants to do with the midterms and immigration has to go through the Supreme Court's summertime shadow docket. That is the emergency slate of cases the Supreme Court takes up when it's not in official session. And the Trump administration has had a ton of success on the shadow docket because there aren't oral arguments. There's not a lot of deep deliberation or explanation from the judges. Hell, they can even put out a ruling without putting their name on it if they want to when it comes from this docket. So there's no fear of a public blowback for an outlandish ruling, like, say, allowing the DOJ to breach private voter data to be used to disenfranchise voters or ramp up the administration's attacks on immigrant communities. It would also be the latest thing the DOJ is bringing to the Supreme Court, which includes the president's ballroom case and another election case about the White House's executive order that would allow the post office to effectively ban mail-in voting. So it was a big first day for Todd Blanche as Attorney General, and if it's a sign of what's to come at the Department of Justice, we might not be fully ready for what's coming. Okay, let's take a quick break. When we come back, who or what is on Natalie Harp, and why is the entire political world talking about her this week? I've found something that I need to stay sane in all this chaos is going to the gym. I go to the Kronk gym here in Detroit. If you're into boxing, that might mean something to you. If not, it's really just an excuse to hit something and, to get a workout in. But I also like to drink a protein shake afterwards to make sure that I'm staying healthy. I have spent years suffering through the worst kinds of protein shakes. Chalky, thick, it's like drinking wet cement. It's just awful. It's honestly worse than the workout. It's why I recently switched to Clear Protein. That's Clear with a K. It's a clear whey protein. They've got 2 great flavors right now, strawberry watermelon and wild blue raspberry. This stuff tastes like a juice drink instead of a milkshake gone wrong, you know what I mean? And it's not skimping to get there either. 20 grams of protein, no sugar, no lactose, so no bloat and no tummy troubles if that's a problem for you and you already know that's a deal breaker. If this sounds like something that you want after your workout, you can get your hands on a 20% off code right now. You can use MIMS25 at checkout. And full disclosure, I do get a cut of this commission, but you'll be helping out the show too and getting some great tasting protein for after your workout. Again, that's Clear Protein with a K. Use MIMS25 at checkout because drinking your protein shake shouldn't be the hardest part of your workout. All right, let's get back to the show. A line in a speech at a rally in Georgia this week has set the political world on fire, while at a campaign stop, the Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff made this remark about the president.
He golfs and trades stocks. See, he doesn't want to do the job. He wants to build his ballroom and travel with Natalie on their apparently defenseless flying palace gifted by the Emir of Qatar.
Okay, I want to say, for starters, this isn't the first time a story about Natalie Harp has bubbled to the surface. And we're going to get into exactly what Ossoff was insinuating there, but I also want to be clear that I've sort of avoided this story because it's more than a little tabloidy and salacious, and there are bigger things to worry about, except this has now crossed a line into something you should know, both in terms of why Ossoff brought Harp up in the first place, and the White House's reaction to it has made it be everywhere. So, who is Natalie? That is Natalie Harp, the president's 35-year-old executive assistant. She is with him everywhere, which isn't an uncommon thing for an executive assistant. Sometimes they're called bagmen or bagwomen, but it's the way she's around him and how she got there. She's essentially Gary from Veep, if you were into that show, which if you haven't seen it, you should be into it. Anyway, she's constantly seen carrying some kind of bag that appears to be the size of her torso. What's inside, we have no clue. But it's always her, that bag, and the military officer with the nuclear football that are with Trump. So whatever's in that bag is important. Now, like I said, we don't know what's in there, but it's been speculated that it's more than just documents. Maybe it's medical supplies. And given the recent video of Trump leaving a rally with a, we'll call it bulge or large bump on his backside that parents of unpotty-trained toddlers have said looks oddly familiar, there's been some who've said it's potentially adult diapers or even a change of clothes. Like I said, this story veers into a place I don't normally go. Harp has been dubbed Trump's human printer because she carries a portable printer around with her to print out things she thinks the president would like to see. Usually it's positive posts about him on social media or mean posts about his enemies that he then lets her repost or write something on his behalf. Sometimes it's cooked up polling numbers or fawning quotes from people that make him feel good about himself if he's in a particularly heated meeting. She is also obsessed with him. Natalie Harp comes into the Trump world around 2018, 2019. She's a bone cancer survivor. Her particular diagnosis was not good, and she says that she received an experimental treatment that would have been denied to her had it not been for the Right to Try Act that Trump signed in 2018. Instead of crediting the doctors, the nurses, the company who made the drug, who saved her, she says she owes her life to Donald Trump, and it seems like she means literally the man and not the act. Here she is saying that at the 2020 Republican National Convention.
In the classic Jimmy Stewart film, It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey is given a great gift, the chance to see what the world would be like without him. Tonight, Mr. President, we'd like to give you that same gift. Because without you, we'd all be living in Pottersville, sold out to a crooked Mr., or I should say, a crooked Mrs. Potter, with no hope of escape except death itself. I should know. Because I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for you.
After that, Harp goes to work for the far-right outlet One America News, where she would end her shows with either a Bible verse or a Trump quote, obviously meaning to blur the lines between the word of Donald Trump and the word of God. Now, Trump likes this so much, and likes the way she looks on TV, that he brings her onto the 2024 campaign, which is mostly run out of Trump's own properties. And according to Trump's biographer, Michael Wolff, Natalie Harp moves into his Bedminster, New Jersey golf club, not into a suite or anything, mind you, into the women's locker room. She slept in the locker room of a golf course to be physically closer to Donald Trump. According to Wolff, this whole thing had been started to be called the Natalie situation among Trump insiders, and she was purposefully not given housing at Bedminster because her fixation with Trump was an open secret and discomfiting for all. Which, in a political machine and a political world like the one that's been built around Trump, where he demands unyielding praise and adulation from people, I mean, Todd Blanche told Donald Trump he loved him publicly, and the late Lindsey Graham cried about Trump losing money on TV. For those kinds of people to be like, hey, Nat, tone it down, is really saying something. But then we get into the letters, which is where this thing really takes a different turn. Natalie Harp has a habit of writing the president missives, little pick-me-up notes of devotion. According to the chief of staff, Susie Wiles, Harp will leave them in personal places for the president and slip them into documents that she prints out for him. One of those letters was from during the 2024 campaign, according to Michael Wolff, and reads like this. After going through all this self-analysis, my conclusion, I need to reunite my past self with my current into a better version who will make you proud. And please, when I fail, will you tell me? You have the absolute right to cuss me out if need be when I deserve it, because no one knows or cares about me. Again, Natalie Harp is writing to Donald Trump. She then says something about her father who passed away, being happy that Trump took her to Scotland, and then ends this note by saying, quote, to modify a classic, I could not have parted with you to anyone less worthy. And I will add, it is I who is unworthy. Always, Natalie. Which, if that's not enough, there's another note that is then later found inside the White House. Harp wrote to Trump, you are all that matters to me. Now, this whole thing comes to a fever pitch, not just for Susie Wiles, but for the Secret Service, who eventually flags Natalie Harp as a potential threat to the president in a Mark Wahlberg in the movie Fear sort of way. But Trump keeps her on anyway. Why? Well, New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman, who's been about as close to Trump as any living person in the last decade, said this about Natalie Harp this weekend.
But Natalie Harp, because she is sort of his Binky, for lack of a better way of putting it, a comfort blanket.
A human pacifier, which makes sense, then, as to why we're talking about Natalie Harp now. I know that was one hell of a wind-up to get to this, but the backstory was important that you understand who she is to Donald Trump. The reason that Harp is in the news isn't just what Senator Ossoff said. It's because when Trump hid out in a catering truck in Turkey last month to not board Air Force One out of fear that it could be attacked by Iran, he brought exactly two people with him, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Natalie Harp. Now, Hegseth makes sense. If there's an attack on Air Force One, Hegseth would need to be someone the president would need to have around in order to have some sort of retaliation plan in place. Natalie Harp? A little less so, unless she's there to soothe a frightened president. But more importantly, it's what it tells us about Trump's priorities in a moment of crisis, because like I said last week, he didn't tell anybody else about that little switcheroo plan. So he left members of his cabinet on board, his press secretary, his staff, the press, the crew, and put them all in what he believed was imminent danger. But he took the woman who leaves him notes in his lunchbox and prints out nice tweets. So that's why Harp is making headlines and why Senator Ossoff uses her name in his speech. And when Trump was asked about that by CNN in the Oval Office, this is what he said.
You mean Pee Wee Herman? Pee Wee Herman lookalike? No, I would much rather do other things. It's
an oddly measured response to a CNN reporter from the president. Except it did seem to get under his skin, because just a few minutes later, when he was asked a different question by that same reporter, Trump lashed out.
Fake news. You're fake news. You're a loud, boisterous person. You're fake news. Be quiet. Be quiet. Be quiet. You're a fake reporter, and you report fake news. Go ahead.
That was a green light for the anonymous but official White House Rapid Response social media accounts to attack that journalist by specifically invoking her young children, which is unethical, frightening, and potentially a threat. The Ossoff quote has also set off a firestorm of its own, with everyone from far-right commentators to members of Congress to members of the White House press office calling what he said sexist. Now, I think it's pretty clear that he brought up Natalie Harp to imply that she and the president were having an affair, which is sexist to say, that a woman couldn't get a position like Harp's without sleeping her way into it. And that is not something that anybody should stand behind, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. It's harmful to women everywhere. I do think it's worth pointing out that many of these same people now talking about standing up for women in the workplace are both the same ones promoting Project 2025, which is actively working to have fewer women working, and many of them cheered on as the same kind of venom, if not worse, was said about Kamala Harris in 2024. Here's a conservative author on Fox News making a pretty disgusting joke about what Kamala Harris had to do to Joe Biden to become vice president.
Yeah, and then there's the DEI press secretary telling you that the DEI vice president is the future of the party here. And so the future looks kind of dim for the Democrats here, but this is no shocker either. Kamala Harris, she's the original Haktua girl. That's the way she got where she is. And the party's going downhill if it's in her hands.
And by the way, the author was seated about 6 feet from current Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, who laughed at that joke. Still, two wrongs don't make a right, and for his part, Ossoff has been trying to clarify what he said.
Well, Jen, thank you for having me, and here's the point. We're in wartime. The commander-in-chief has mired us in this geopolitical disaster. People have lost their lives. Our naval logistics are frayed. The global energy system is in crisis. And he retreats into this bubble of West Wing aides who are his security blanket to make him feel good about himself.
Now, honestly, that isn't that different from what I said a little bit ago, but it clearly wasn't the takeaway from what Ossoff said at his rally either, and I'm not sure he was expecting this kind of blowback. And really, what's at play here is the midterm election. I'm not so sure that all these people coming out of the woodwork to defend Natalie Harp are all that concerned about her. I think on the one hand, they need the president to see them defending her. It's pretty well known that in the White House, if you want something to get in front of the president, you need to get it printed by Natalie. So if you don't defend her and she knows that, you're not likely to get something in front of the president. But more so, unseating Jon Ossoff from Georgia would be huge for Republicans this fall. And if he's seen as attacking a white college-educated woman by accusing her of using sex to get her a job instead of her qualifications, well, that might turn off some very key voters, meaning white college-educated suburban women, from voting for him. Maybe. But also, potentially maybe in Georgia. Which, I suppose in a way, makes both of these stories today about the same thing. Todd Blanche and Natalie Harp aren't really all that different. They're examples of what it takes in this White House to get ahead and what the president demands, which is unwavering, near-fanatical loyalty to him. And even though that's not a revelation, it is one to see just how far Trump is willing to push someone to go to get that. And these two couldn't make a clearer picture of that unless one of them printed it out for us. Okay. That is it for today's show. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget, you have just a few days left to become a paid subscriber to the Make It Make Sense Substack. We get access to this week's Things You Forgot from Civics class, all about how independent agencies work, how they're supposed to work, and how that might be changing. Not just because of Todd Blanche, but a lot of things. And as always, share the show on social media. You can tag me at Grant Hermes on Twitter, Blue Sky, and the Say So News app, and at Grant_Hermes on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Hermes, and I'll talk to you next time.